الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today's fiqh, inshallah, instead of aqidah, only this week that we made that change, inshallah, but next week, inshallah, going back as normal, inshallah. So today we have the fiqh session, and we stopped at Salat al-Kusuf. Salat al-Kusuf. But before we start, inshallah ta'ala, a reminder for myself and everyone that and never to give up and to be patient, especially with majalis al-ilm, with the gatherings of ilm. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us sincerity. Remember the hadith of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, when he came out one time on a halaqah in the masjid, and he said, "Ma ajlasakum?" What made you sit here and present? So they said, "Jalasna nadhkurillah." We said to make remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Majalis al-dhikr, by the way, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, is majalis al-ilm, where the Prophet ﷺ would teach them and they would learn. That's majalis al-dhikr, not the bid'ah innovations in the deen that people invented after the Prophet ﷺ. So he said to them, "Allahi ma ajlasakum illa dhak." By Allah, that's the only reason you said that, is because of that reason. So they said, "Wallahi ma ajlasana illa dhak." The only reason why we said is the dhikr of Allah, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, "Ama inni lam astahlifukum tuhmatan lakum." I did not ask you by Allah because I'm accusing you of something. وَمَا كَانَ أَحَدٌ مِّن مَنْزِلَتِي مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم أَقَلَّ حَدِيثًا مِنِّي. And no one is, I'm not of a better status to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. But then he said, وَإِنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. The reason he explained why he said that to them, he said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam came out one time on a halaqah among the companions radiallahu anhum, and he said, "Ma ajlasakum?" What made you what made you sit there? So they said, "Jalasna nadhkurillah wa nahmadu ala ma hadana lil Islam wa manna bihi alayna." So he said, "Allahi ma ajlasakum illa dhak." By Allah, this is the only reason why you sat there. So they said, "Wallahi ma ajlasana illa dhak." قال أما إني لم أستحلفكم تهمة لكم. Prophet ﷺ said to them, "I did not ask you by Allah because of accusing you of any wrongdoing or any bad intentions. ولكنه أتاني جبريل." The reason why Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ فأخبرني أن الله عز وجل يباهي بكم الملائكة. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يباهي بكم. Al-mubaha is when someone is proud of someone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is proud of you in front of the angels, informing the angels of that. And that is a repeated thing. It's not just a special thing at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It happens at all times for those who only sit for the sake of Allah. Those who sit in the masajid for the sake of Allah, to learn the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. So in any matter that we learn of the deen, fiqh, aqidah, any subject, this is for us to get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, which is basically the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we stopped at Salat al-Kusuf. And sometimes it's called al-Kusuf, sometimes they call it al-Khusuf, with a kaf or with a kha. Both are synonyms to one another, basically. Al-Kusuf is al-Khusuf, and we'll talk about the definition of it. But the norm, or most likely, when the fuqaha, they would differentiate between both, they would refer to Shams, the sun. When it's eclipse of the sun, they call it Kusuf, with a kaf. And if it's for the moon, they call it Khusuf. So Khusuf al-Qamar wa Kusuf al-Shams. But if someone use the matter opposite, that's fine. So if you say Khusuf al-Shams or Khusuf in general, all the time you say it Khusuf, that's fine. If you say Kusuf all the time, no problem. But some had mentioned that specific differences between al-Kusuf and al-Khusuf. So what is the kusuf or al-khusuf. We'll call it as the book al-kusuf. Okay, but now we know that both are the same. What is al-kusuf? What is the definition of al-kusuf, which is the eclipse? ذهاب ضوء الشمس أو القمر. The light of the sun or the moon disappearing. The disappearing of the light from the sun or the moon. And this is ayah, a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has a wisdom behind it. Nothing happens unless there's a reason for it. So this is an ayah from Allah. What is always the wisdom behind these physical ayat around us? He says here, يدعو الإنسان إلى الاستعداد, to prepare oneself, to be watchful, to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. Everything happens by the power of Allah. And to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when things are changing. So the eclipse or kusuf is not a repeated thing on a daily basis. It happens once every so long. So since this is an ayah that doesn't happen all the time, so it gives us the sense that when things, if things are happening every day, we should turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, every day. But when something happens out of the ordinary, and this is an ayah from Allah, so there's something extra here is needed. And that is to give more of the luju' ila Allah, to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, to repent to Allah, to make you reflect upon the amazing creation of Allah, because the human beings, they tend to forget when something is happening all the time. And that's why from the great signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-laylu wal-nahar wal-shamsu wal-qamar, the day and the night and the sun and the moon, that each one of it is just a great sign from Allah. But since we're seeing it every day, so it just become a normal thing and doesn't, affect, in which it should affect the hearts. But because of the nature of the human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He willed for these signs to happen once in a while, for people to, again, to exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship. And as you see these signs, people are either they're heedless, make them even more heedless, and they just have parties and things like this, and the believers, they rush to the salah, to the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why it's called Salatul Kusuf or Salatul Khusuf. There's a salah here associated with this eclipse or this universal sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, فَإِذَا كَسَفَتِ الشَّمْسُ وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ. Now he mentioned both with the Shams and the Qamar. كَسَفَتِ الشَّمْس وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ. Sunnat. So now we need to know the difference. Even though they're both, again, they are synonym, but al-kusuf with a kaf is for the sun, al-khusuf for the qamar, to be more precise. Okay? So, فَإِذَا كَسَفَتِ الشَّمْسُ وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ سُنَّت صَلَاةُ الْكُسُوفِ جَمَاعًا. Sunnat with a ta' maftuha, not sunnah. Sunnat, that means this is then the verb of it. It becomes a sunnah then. Then it's from the sunnah to pray Salatul Kusuf Jama'a, in congregation. So the ruling, what is the hukm of Salatul Kusuf? Sunnah. That means it's recommended, it's not fard. And to be prayed Jama'a. ومن آياته الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر لا تسجدوا للشمس ولا للقمر واسجدوا لله الذي خلقهن إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. So the ruling of Salatul Kusuf, it's sunnah, and it's to be done in Jama'ah. Then he says, وَقْتُهَا. When is the time for Salatul Kusuf? مِنْ وَقْتِ ابْتِدَاءِ الْكُسُوفِ إِلَى ذَهَبِ. From the first time of the eclipse, once the eclipse happens, once the Kusuf happens, till it's gone. All of it, not partial, till it's all gone. إِلَى ذَهَابِهِ. And that's why the eclipse or the Khusuf or the Kusuf, it doesn't matter whether it's full or partial. If there is a partial eclipse, that's considered also to be Kusuf, and that means we make Salah also there. From the beginning of it till the end of it. وَلَا تُقْضَى إِنْ فَاتَتْ. لَا تُقْضَى إِنْ فَاتَتْ. It is not to make qada for it if it's the time of it is missed. If the kusuf is finished, there's no more kusuf, you don't make it up. ولم ينقل الأمر بها بعد التجلي لفوات محلها. There's no أمر, there's no command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or in the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to do it after it is removed, the eclipse is removed. There's no such a thing because the time of it is finished. So this is the time for it. So even if people, they did not pray it from the very beginning, they can still pray even if there is only a short period of time left. صفatuha, how the صفة or how to make Salatul Kusuf, because it's a different salah, because it's a different sign from Allah. He says rak'atan, 2 rak'ah, and this is of course agreed upon that it's 2 rak'ah. يقرأ في الأولى جهرا الفاتحة. You recite, usually the way that they would word things refer to the third person. يقرأ في الأولى. يقرأ, he recites. So this is always the way in the books of fiqh, instead of saying تقرأ as if you are or addressing the reader, but saying يقرأ في الأولى. So he recites in the first rak'ah جهرا, to be recited loud, al-Fatiha, even if it's during the day. Even though we know that the salah, if it's during the night, the norm is that you say jahran. If it's a salah during the day, you make it sirran, silently. But with the kusuf, it's to be done jahran during the day or during the night. Jahran al-Fatiha. Wa suratan tawila, and a long surah after surah al-Fatiha. ثم يركع طويلا, then to make a long ruku'. ثم يرفع, then he gets up from ruku'. فيسمع ويحمد, to say سمع الله لمن حمده. Then to read Surah Al-Fatiha again. So 2 qiyam in 1 rak'ah. So Surah Al-Fatiha, a long surah, making ruku', long ruku', coming up from ruku', سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد. Then أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. The Imam recites again Surah Al-Fatiha loud. وسورة طويلة, and a long surah. And in some of the, as he would see here, the longest is the first one, then a little bit shorter or less in the second one, and then the same thing with the second one. So وسورة طويلة ثم يركع, then he makes ركوع, ثم يرفع, then to get up again from ركوع, ثم يسجد سجدتين طويلتين, then to make 2 long sujood. Normally with every rak'ah you make 2 sujood. So the only thing different is 2 qiyam. Qiyam, ruku', coming up from ruku', qiyam again, then ruku', then coming up from ruku' again, then 2 sajda. Clear? ثم يصلي الثانية كالأولى, then to pray the second rak'ah the same way as the first rak'ah. وهي أقل منها في جميع أحوالها, but less in all of its positions. So less Quran to be recited, and less time in ruku', and less time in sujood, but the same thing, 2 qiyam and 2 sujood and 1 rak'ah, 1 ruku'. He says ولها صفات أخرى. It has, you can do it in many, or there's more than one way to be, for it to be done. وهذه أثبتها وأتمها. This is the most confirmed way and the most perfect way, because some said to pray 2 rak'ah like normal 2 rak'ah, like in the Ahnaf or the like of them, but this is where the hadith is established in the meaning of what we heard. وإن أتى بثلاثة ركوعات, someone made 3 ruku', how or 4 or 5. He says فلا بأس إذا دعت الحاجة لذلك. There's no harm if it's needed. What's the need here? The eclipse or the kusuf is long, because it's best, the most perfect way is that the salah would تستغرق or occupies the entire time of the khusuf. If it's say 4 hours, if they can pray the 4 hours in salah, it's perfect. This is the best. But whatever people do, or whatever their need, then they do the best they can. So if it's that it's very long, so they want to make 2, it's easier for them than to make a very long stand, is to make 3 ruku' or 4 ruku'. That's no harm. Salah is valid. So if it's 3 or 4, the same thing. Standing, Fatiha, Surah, Ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida, getting up, Surah Al-Fatiha and Surah, Ruku', and keep on going like this. Okay? So this is basically what is mentioned about Surah Salat Al-Kusuf. It says Jama'ah. Can people pray it at home? It's not mentioned here. Some, and this is a valid difference of opinions, that it's okay according to some that it's for it to be prayed at home. But the Prophet ﷺ prayed it in the masjid. So, and they said since it's sunnah, that means the matter is much easier. But again, we're taking the opinion that it's to be done jama'ah in the masjid, and that's what needs to be done. The next subject is al-janaiz, salatul janazah, and we're not sure if Sadlan. Yes. You mean for the second rak'ah, that means they missed only one. Right? No, that's fine. The second one is what counts for the rak'ah. So if they catch a standing, they cut the rak'ah. If the second standing, they were in the ruku' of the second ruku' of the first rak'ah, they got this rak'ah. No, Allah. طيب الجنائز is the, what's the janaiz? The funeral. And there is salatul janaza and the janaiz. So, but the janaiz here is the funeral. So sometimes in some of the books of fiqh, they would mention some of the things about sickness or the deathbed sickness and the like of this. So we'll go through what is mentioned here. He says al-janaiz. The first point, a reminder. The human being, مهما طال أجله, no matter how long a person lives, فلا بد أن يموت. He has to die. We have to die. We were born to die. We're not born to live forever. This life is a temporary one. وَانْتَقِلُ مِنْ دَارِ الْعَمَلِ إِلَى دَارِ الْجَزَاءِ. And to be moved from the place of action, which is this dunya, to the place of recompense, which again, we can deceive one another. People can be just, they like to have fun or not to let anyone to disturb their fun. But what's the benefit if a person is just being led astray? This life is a serious life. It's not the life of playing. Playing in this life, this is not the objective of this life. The life is the life of action, is the life of amal. The hereafter, this is the time to rest. But in this life, يا أيها الإنسان إنك كادح إلى ربك كدحا فملاقيه. And the more even the signs of Allah that happens around us, this is something that we need to expand more upon. When the ummah is now seeing what's happening, this is definitely not the time of playing anymore. Just put the play on the side. No need for us to, it's just now becomes the playing thing is a necessity for us to be able to continue working hard, to take a break after working hard. That's what it's supposed to be. Not that life is all about just enjoying oneself and having fun and things like this. It's a mean to keep on being steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, but then he mentioned here first that from the right of the Muslim upon the Muslim, that he visit him if he's sick. So now some of the ahkam, but not too much, some of the rulings, and there's ahkam, there's rulings of sickness for the sick person and for the other than the sick person. So it's the right of the Muslim. If a Muslim is sick, he has a right upon the people, the Muslims, to visit him. وَيَتْبَعْ جَنَازَتَهُ إِذَا مَاتَ. And from the rights of the Muslim is to follow his janazah if he dies. And the more the person that the more that rights he has upon you. Even though, as mentioned before, but this will be mentioned here, that Salatul Janazah is fardu kifayah. It's fardu kifayah. If some do it, then the rest of the community are not sinful. But if it's someone that which is even makes it more of a right upon you to follow the janazah. He says, وَيَتْبَعْ جَنَازَتَهُ إِذَا مَاتَ. He says, تُسَنُّ عِيَادَةِ الْمَرِيضِ وَتَذْكِيرِهِ بِالتَّوْبَةِ وَالْوَصِيَّةِ. So the first thing is, we need to just make sure that we have these points: the admonition of death, the remembrance of death, and this dunya is dar al-amal to dar al-jaza. The right of the Muslim to visit the sick, his right is to be visited, and his right is to follow his janazah if he dies. And then تسن عيادة المريض. It's recommended, of course, to visit the marid or the sick, وتذكيره بالتوبة والوصية, to remind him with the tawbah and الوصية. Some people, if you remind someone of his wasiyah when he's sick, as if you're giving him the bad news or something. No, this is, we always have to remind one another. No one knows when the moment of death will come. So he says, no. Al-wasiyah is the will. If he doesn't have a will, he should have a will. And especially if he has loans and things like this, and especially if someone is living in the West in general. Especially if someone living in America, you have to have a will. Why? Because if a person dies, his money will automatically goes to some person or his first in kin or so. So things has to be made clear. And there's no, this is a serious matter, and we talked about that before, and we should always mention it. It's going to come in the subject of al-mawarith, inshallah ta'ala. So he says, يسن أن يوجه من حضرته الوفاة القبلة. If someone dies, it's yusan. That means it's recommended after he dies that he faces the qibla, not before he dies. But if someone is laying in bed and he's sick and he wants to face the qibla, sure. But this is not necessarily what is meant by when they say when someone dies. It's when after he dies, it's recommended that he faces the qibla by making him on the right side and the face facing the qibla if it's not difficult. It's recommended if it's not difficult. Otherwise, to put him on his back, وَرِجْلَاهُ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ. If it's not possible to put him on the side, is to keep him laying flat on his back and the foot facing the qibla. And that's also something for people. Some people think that if you're laying down and your foot is facing the qibla, this is bad manners. No, this is one of the ways of making salah if a person is not able to sit. If a person is not able to stand in salah, to sit. If someone is not able to even pray sitting, to pray laying down. And laying down, if a person is not able to sit, is on the right side facing the qibla. What if he's not? If he's able to lift himself up a little bit, then it's better. And he faces the qibla with his face and he makes salah. If that is not feasible, then to lay down on his back and his foot facing the qibla and to make salah. So this is one of the positions to face the qibla in the salah. So there's nothing wrong for someone to have his foot facing the qibla. He says, وَارْفَعْ رَأْسَهُ. If, again, he says to raise the head a little bit, to face the qibla if he's able to do so. He says, ثُمَّ يُلَقَّنْ الشَّهَادَةِ. Again, if this is even when a person dies, if they're able to raise his head a little bit to face the qibla, this is perfect. If it's not, then that's fine. This is before he dies. Sorry, this is before he dies. Now, okay, this is, I go back with this, inshallah, because some of the ulama, they had mentioned that this is not from the sunnah whatsoever, before dying, that you would make the person face the qibla. And some of the Salaf, they would forbid people when they try to make them face the qibla when they're still alive. Unless it's always recommended to face the qibla. But he mentions it here, which is fine. So again, so it's with regards to those who did not die yet, those who are dying, to make them face the qibla on the right side or on their back and to lift them up. And then ثُمَّ يُلَقَّنُ الشَّهَادَةَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. To make the talqeen. At-talqeen is to say something and someone to say after you. So to say to them to say لا إله إلا الله ويبل حلقه بماء أو شراب, and to wet his throat or his mouth with water because it becomes dry, and that helps him to say لا إله إلا الله. And there's ways to say this so that the dying person does not get irritated, by reminding him of it once in a while, and not to be pushy, because he might be disturbed and he might refuse to say it, for example. He says here, وَيَقْرَأُ عِنْدَهُ سُورَةَ يَسِينَ. He mentions it here that he recites next to him Surah Yasin. And Surah Yasin, as we know, that the hadith that talks about Surah Yasin by the dead, they're all weak. Right? But there's only one hadith, and that's, he's referring to this one, or he mentioned it because of that. There is one hadith that the ulama have differences of opinions whether it's authentic or not. So we have to be clear on this, inshallah. The hadith that talks about reciting Surah Yasin, they're all weak except one hadith. The one hadith is اقرأوا ياسين على موتاكم, recite Yasin on the dead among you. Right? And what is meant by this, some said it's weak and some said it's authentic. So this is the only hadith in Surah Yasin that has differences of opinions among the ulama of the hadith. Those who said it's authentic, it's meant to be when a person is dying, not after he dies. After he dies, this is not from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ whatsoever. So we have to make this clear. After someone's died, people will recite Surah Yasin in the graveyard and all of this. That's not from the Sunnah. None of the Sahaba did that whatsoever. It's the only hadith that, again, if a person before he dies, if they recite next to him Surah Yasin. And for those who said it's weak, then it is not to be recited. But a person can recite any surah, and one of which is Surah Yasin. So if someone likes to recite Surah Yasin, likes to hear Surah Yasin, no one is to prevent him by saying it's bid'ah. No, it's not bid'ah to read Quran. But it's bid'ah for someone to think that this is a virtuous thing to recite this particular surah in that particular place. This is where it gets into the bid'ah. But some of the Salaf would like, for example, when they're dying, they want to hear the ayat of Surah Al Imran that talked about the Battle of Uhud and things like this. They like to hear these verses. So they would give even the wasiyah, not wasiyah, but if they are dying, that they want to hear these verses. Or the verses that talks about the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to die with having hope for the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is all fine. And the believer is always attached to the Quran. So here he says, وَيَقْرَأُ عِنْدَهُ سُورَةَ يَاسِينَ. Then he said, إِذَا مَاتَ الْمُسْلِمُ سُنَّةَ تَغْمِيضُ عَيْنَيْهِ. If a Muslim dies, it's from the sunnah to close his eyes. Because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that البصر تتبع الروح. When a person dies, his basar, his eyesight follows his soul. He sees himself when he's dying. So the Prophet ﷺ said then to close the eyes. وَشَدِّ لِحْيَيْهِ بِعِصَابَةٍ. لحييه, this is the لحييه, not the lihya. Lihya is the beard. But al-lahyayn, which is why the lihya is called lihya, is the lower jaw, the whole lower jaw. So to tie it with a isaba, with a piece of cloth or something. Why is that? So that his mouth does not become wide open, and that doesn't look very pleasant for the person. Please, so to tie it so that it doesn't relax and open. So this is also recommended. وَتَلْيِينَ مَفَاصِلِهِ بِرِفْقٍ. When a person dies, it's recommended right after he dies to soften his joints with gentleness, so that it does not get stiff after some time. Because if it's not right after a person dies, if he dies like this or like that, whatever, the organs become stiff. So to soften it right after he dies, birifq, with gentleness. And all of that if it's feasible, of course. And he says, وَرَفْعُهُ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. It's also from the sunnah to raise him up from the earth. If he dies on the ground, to raise him on a higher place. There is a wisdom behind that, so that maybe the insects or the things might not get to him faster. So to preserve the body as fast as they can. وَخَلْعِ ثِيَابِهِ, and to remove his clothing. وَسَتْرَ عَوْرَتِهِ, but to cover his awrah. And the awrah, the private part of the deceased, is to be covered at all times, even when he's being washed. It's not to be uncovered whatsoever. It should be always covered. And those who wash the dead, they know how to do these types of things so that it's always covered. And they would wash it from underneath a towel or so, but it's always covered. وَوَضْعُوا عَلَى سَرِيرِ غَسْلِهِ مُتَوَجِّهًا الْقِبْلَةِ, and they put him on the bed of washing, facing the Qibla, على جنبه الأيمن إن تيسر, on his right side if it's easy, or on his back with his foot facing the Qibla. And that's basically just preparing him till he is to be washed. So this is just to put him there so that they wash him. And it's from the sunnah always to make these things in haste, not to wait, not to delay for the benefits of those who are alive. That's if a person knows that his family might delay his janazah and things like this, he should make it in his wasi, not to delay it. Sometimes people, they delay so that the relatives come from traveling and from other cities and all of that. No, this is against the sunnah. From the ikram, from the honor of the deceased is to bury him quickly, to take the means as quick as the person can for him to be buried. غسل الميت, he says أولى الناس بغسل الميت وصيه. Okay, who has more rights to wash the dead? وصيه, the one that he mentioned in his will, this person is to wash me if I die. And if he's present, then he's the one that has the rights to do so, if he has mentioned someone in specific. And if not, then, or if that person is not present, or that person is going to take him a while till he come, then the wasiyah is not to be fulfilled in this case. Then abuhu, then his father, then his grandfather. So this is the usul, and this is going to be repeated in matters of inheritance and other things, and these are the asaba. So the father and above meaning the grandfather and so on, if they are present. ثم الأقرب, then after that, if none of them, then those who are closer to him, sons and below if they're grown-ups enough, or brothers or whatever. And if not, anyone, as long as usually the one that is washes the deceased should be someone that is trustworthy, someone that is righteous to the best of their ability. وَالْأُنْثَى وَصِيَّتُهَا, also the female, if she dies, if she had asked for someone specifically to wash her, then that should be first, then her mother, then her grandmother, then the relatives among her from the women. The same thing as men, but of course females. And then another mas'ala, وَلِكُلِّ مِنَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الْمُسْلِمَيْنِ غَسْلِ صَاحِبِهِ. It is for the two spouses, Muslims, to wash one another. Because if the religion is different, then there's nothing whatsoever to be observed. If someone marries a non-Muslim and she dies, because it's not permissible the other way around, and she dies, he has nothing to do with her. She's not to be buried among the Muslims. He does not want. She's not to be washed or anything. She's a disbeliever. So this is لكل من الزوجين المسلمين غسل صاحبه. The next مسألة, are we following? Everything's here. ويشترط في الغاسل. The الغاسل, the one that washes. It's a condition أن يكون عاقلا, that he is sane, of course, he's not insane. مميزا, that means if someone is less than the age of puberty, this is valid, as long as he's able to do so. That's why he said مميزا, able to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. ثقة, trustworthy. عارفا بإحكام الغسل, he knows the ruling of al-ghusl. And ثقة, because he's supposed to hide what he sees. If he sees something that is in the body or something like this, or a bad sign. Sometimes people think of something being a bad sign. Well, it's not a bad sign. So he is not to say anything bad about the deceased. So he has to be trustworthy. He says, وَيَحْرُمْ أَنْ يُغَسِّلَ مُسْلِمٌ كَافِرًا. It's not permissible, it's haram. He's a ruling mas'ala. A Muslim washing a disbeliever, it's haram. It's haram to do that. أو يدفنه, or he would bury him in janazah and bury him. It's not permissible. بل يواريه بالتراب إذا عدم من يواريه. If a person dies, he is to be given to his people, to whatever his religion is, and it shows the importance of the religion, because that's what stays with the person forever. You know, people, they invent all kinds of relationships when they're alive. When they die, they go to their people. So if for someone that is a disbeliever, when he dies, if no one is going to take him to bury him, it is not permissible also to leave him like this. So that means yuwarihi bit-turab is different than to bury him. Yuwarihi bit-turab, that means whatever means is to bury him in a way that is not ritual or not salah or not dua or anything, just to put him under the ground in whatever the laws of the land that would permit such a way. But it's haram to wash him and to, of course, make salah on him and things like this. Then he says صفة الغسل المسنون للميت, the way of washing, the recommended way of washing the dead. And in general, al-ghusl is when a person is alive is the same when a person is dead, but when a person is dead, he does not wash himself, someone else washes him. So, but then sometimes a person needs to learn how to do this because you're dealing with a dead body. So how to make sure that the aura is not exposed and what to start with first and things like this. And some of the things that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. So briefly, he says, إذا أخذ في غسل الميت ستر عورته, covering the aura at all times. Then he would raise his head to make him close to sitting. ويعصر بطنه برفق. I would say to squeeze the stomach with gentleness. Why is that? ويكثر صب الماء, while pouring water, lots of water, while he's doing this. Why? So that if there's anything that was ready to come out from the body, then it comes out, najasat, so that it doesn't come out later and would make the kafan impure. Right? So that's why يعصر بطنه برفق. So to squeeze the stomach with gentleness, and while doing that, to pour lots of water so that anything that is of impurities, it goes away. Then ثم يلف على يده خرقة فينجي. Then to wrap a piece of cloth in his hand or with gloves to make istinja for him from underneath the cover, not to uncover, but from underneath to wash the private parts with a ha'il, not with one's bare hand, of course, with something. And it's best that it's not, gloves doesn't really give or do the job, because the gloves, as if a person can feel the person, but if it's a piece of cloth, he would not feel the private part. So it's better to be with the gloves of people. Of course, nowadays they wear gloves anyway, but then with a piece of cloth, so that he does not touch even with a glove, right? So it's best to be the glove and a piece of cloth. So this is all first, and then ثم يوضئه ندبا بعد أن يضع على يده خرقة أخرى. Then to remove, of course, this dirty piece of cloth, or if it's the gloves, to remove it, to replace it with something else, with another glove, and then to make him have wudu. ندبا, that means it's recommended. So full wudu. ثم ينوي غسله. Then he has the intention. Who's the one that should have the intention? The one that is alive, of course. So this is where the ghusl, it's wajib, but it's not for the dead, it's for the one that is alive. And yanwi, that means it has to be a Muslim, of course. So his niyyah is to make ghusl for him. ويسمي, say Bismillah, فيغسله بالماء والسدر أو الصابون, with water. السدر, what is it in English? Lotus? Okay. It's known, right? You guys know what's the lotus means? Everybody knows. Has a very strong smell. The kafur is different. Kafur is different. As-sidr is one thing. Kafur is to be done at the last washing. The first two, he is to be washed 3 times. What's more perfect is to be washed 3 times. The first 2 with water and sidr, which is lotus, or soap. Soap is fine. So to wash it with soap, starting with the head and the lihya, then his right side, then his left side. And of course, it needs some experience for a person to do that. So to move him to the left side first, so that you wash the right side first, from the top to the bottom, while covering the aura still. And then the left side, then to do that second time and third time, like the first one. فإن لم ينق زاد حتى ينق. If he's not clean after 3 times, you do more till he's clean. ويجعل في الغسلة الأخيرة مع الماء كفورا أو طيبا. And the last washing is to include in the water camphor, or pleasant smell. Kafur, because it's very strong smell, it does not make the person smell bad. Clear? So al-ma' was-sidr, or the sabun, the first 2. With soap, the first 2. The third one, you add kafur or perfume or whatever nice oil smell, so that he's washed with that with the third one. وإن كان شارب وأظافره طويلا أخذ منها if his even though this is not a must, but if the mustache is long, if his nails are long, if they're able to cut it, then this is good. Then it's to be dried ثم ينشف بثوب والمرأة يجعل شعرها 3 قرون ويسدل من ورائها. And for the female to make her hair 3 braids and to be left from behind her, to behind her back. تكفين الميت, how to make kafan or to wrap the mayit in the kafan. And al-kafan or kafan, but the kafan is sheets. He says يسن, it's recommended أن يكفن الرجل في 3 لفائف بيض. It's from the sunnah, it's recommended for the man to be wrapped in 3 لفائف, in 3 sheets, white, 3 white sheets. تبخر, to be scented with scent so that it smells nice. ثم تبسط بعضها فوق بعض, then it's to be put one on top of the other. This is how to put it. So you put it on a separate bed. So he's washed on one bed and the sheets, 3 sheets on top of each other, exactly on top of each other, to be put on the second, on the other bed. He says ويجعل الحنوط وهو أخلاط من الطيب فيما بين اللفائف, to put some طيب or حنوط. الحنوط is a mixture of طيب, mixture of nice oil or smell, so that again this is all so that till he is buried people will only smell good smell, to honor the deceased so that people don't smell anything bad from him. So to put it between, that means in every sheet. Then to put the mayyit على اللفائف, then he is to be put on these sheets on the top one, laying down. ويجعل قطنا بين إليتيه. This is kind of the details. It's not necessarily has a hadith or anything like this. It's just the practicality of it. To put cotton in his private part in the places where things might come out. So in the behind and things like this. And to ويشد فوقه خرقة, and to make him with the cotton and a rope or something like this, or a sheet, that as if he's wearing like an underwear like that, or like a Pampers type of thing with cotton and things like this, so that it becomes more secure. If anything comes out, this will be in these types of things, not to affect the coffin or the sheets. ويطيب ذلك مع سائر بدني, and also the rest of the body and the lafa'if is to be given nice smell of oil or something like that. Then the way to wrap him is يرد طرف اللفافة العليا من الجانب الأيسر على شقه الأيمن. You go from the left side, from the first sheet, to wrap him to go to the right side, and then to get the other side to wrap him on the other side, and to go from underneath him. And then you do the second one the same thing, and the third one the same way. ويجعل الفاضل عند رأسه, and any extra to be put by his head, to be extra by his head, meaning extra cloth. ثم يعقدها, then it's to be tight. عرضا وتحل في القبر, is to be wrapped, and then to loosen it in the grave, not to uncover him, but to loosen it in the grave, as he says. And even though if it's not, it's fine, but not to make it tight, to loosen it once he is buried in the grave. And this is all to protect him till he is put in the grave. Some people, they uncover the face in the grave. No, there's no evidence of that. ويكفن الصبي في ثوب واحد ويباح في 3. If it's a child, he can make, the coffin can be 1 sheet, and it's permissible if it's 3. So the excessiveness is not permissible. Expensive types of clothing, of cloth, this is all excessiveness that shouldn't be. الحي أولى من الميت. Those who are alive are more, they have more rights than the deceased, as Abu Bakr even mentioned. Something would do the job, not something extremely expensive and things of that nature. And as for the woman, والمرأة تؤزر بالمئزر ثم تلبس القميص. For women, it's extra covering. Extra covering for the woman. So that means the 3 sheets, or he says here ثم تلبس, let's just say the woman separate. والمرأة تؤزر بالمئزر. She is to put a مئزر. المئزر is the lower sheet.
So the lower sheet. Then al-qamis. Al-qamis is what from the head down. So she has a mi'zar, she has an izar. And the same thing with the cotton, and all of these things are to be observed. But for the woman, she has a lower sheet and the qamis, which is from the top to the bottom. Then tukhammaru bil-khimar. Al-qamis is usually where it goes through the neck. So it's not covering the head. Qamis is from something from the neck, and it's sewed so that it's more covering. So the men, 3 sheets, open sheets, and you wrap them one after the other, and that's sufficient. For the women, an izar and qamis from the neck down, and al-khimar, the khimar from the top of her head going down. He says, والقميص ثم تلبس القميص ثم تخمر بالخمار والقميص ولفافتين ثم تلبس القميص ثم تخمر بالخمار ثم تلف باللفافتين. Which basically it's 5, but he mentions here, what do you have in the English? I want to see what's the translation.
The loincloth, and then body length shirt, and then a head covering, and then 2 sheets. A young girl is shot in a long sleeveless shirt.
So this is just a typos here. So it's 5, supposed to be the lower sheet, and the qamis, and the khimar, and 2 sheets. And if it's more, that's fine. Okay, this is for the women. So women is 5, and men are, or actually, women is 5 pieces, and men 3. So women is more in covering. So for women, what's extra, what's different is the izar, qamis, khimar. Izar, qamis, khimar, and 2 sheets. So that would take care of 1 sheet for the men. Is it clear? And he says, وَالْبِنْتُ الصَّغِيرَ فِي قَمِيصٍ وَلِفَافَتَيْن. If it's a young girl, qamis and 2 lifaf. There's no need for izar and khimar. If it's a young girl. He says, يُجْزِئُ غَسْلَ الْمَيِّتِ ذَكَرًا كَانَ أَوْ أُنْثَى مَرَّةً وَاحِدَةً يَعُمُّ جَمِيعَ بدني. It's sufficient if the deceased is washed 1 time. It's sufficient. It's the minimum. 1 time. It's recommended. It's more perfect if it's done 3 times. And this is for both men or women. وَيُجْزِئُ تَكْفِينَهُ بِثَوْبٍ وَاحِدٍ. And it's sufficient also if it's 1 thawb, 1 sheet to make the coffin, to wrap him in 1, as long as it covers the entire body, even if it's for women, as long as it's covered, as long as it's covering, does not show, and is not transparent, does not shape to a great extent. And that's why even Fatima radiallahu anha, before she died, she was giving the wasiyah. She was worried that if she is carried after she dies, if she's carried, people will see her wrapped. So she was worried about being shaped after her death. You can imagine. And it shows the iffa and the eagerness to be away from the eyes of men. So when Safiya radiallahu anha, she told her that they saw in the Habasha, in Abyssinia, something where they put this nash, or this half a circle thing on top of the dead. So she liked that. So since then, this has become the practice. So that it's like a qaus, like anything. It doesn't have to be one thing, but just something around the dead person on the bed, and they put a sheet. Or if itself any means of covering so that the body doesn't shape. Especially for women, this is more of iffa and goodness for it to be done. طيب السقط is the infant if when a woman have a miscarriage, if he reaches 4 months and then he dies. سمي وغسل وصلى عليه. If he dies after 4 months of pregnancy, 4 months and above, then he's to be given a name, to be washed if he is formed, and to make Salatul Janazah on him. If it's before 4 months, or he comes out pieces, for example, pieces, that means it's not lam yukhallaq, he's not been created yet, because he might die before 4 months, or it's not die, it means there's no life before that, but he was not given life, but they get him out after 4 months. So that means he's not 4 months. So that's why the ulama, they said he comes out mukhallaq. Mukhallaq, that means like a human being, not pieces of flesh, for example. So if he comes out like this, and the 4 months, which is because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he is to be given name and to be washed and to be prayed janazah on him. Then صفة الصلاة على الميت. Are we going fast?
said that exposing the face not for some for the men usually I've seen some people.
Right. Allah Alam, there's no evidence for that. It's if some said to loosen the ropes, that's fine, but to uncover the face, there's no evidence of that. Oh, that's a different situation. You're talking about after burying, or before he's buried. There's this practice where people, they put the deceased and they uncover the face for people to come and see him. This is something that shouldn't be done. If someone after he dies and he's still before the ghusl is being done and people come and see him, relatives or so, that's fine. But to put him on a display like this for the masjid, for everybody to see him, this is not a way to honor the deceased. Wallahu a'lam.
Prior to lowering the face.
So people see them. This is not something that has been practiced by the early generations of Islam, anything like this. I mean, you can say that it's haram, but it's not honoring the deceased. Because once you make this as a practice, what if something that, a person's face changed? Or, sometimes people, when they die, their color changes. So this is not something that people want to see. So how would you differentiate between one or the other? So definitely, this is something that people should avoid. No.
Those spouses can wash one another. I just want to clarify because it happens in my family back home that if a wife dies, the husband, after she passes away, he's not allowed to look at her.
No, this is not. This is some weak opinions from some, but there's evidence where the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha said to him, "If you die before me, I wash you, and you die before me, I wash you," like this. And the Prophet ﷺ approved that. So this notion of when someone, one of the spouses dies, the relationship is terminated. That's not true. Yes, it's terminated because one is dead, but it's she's still his wife. He can wash her. But as long as, if other women will come and he's the only one that can wash her. None else can see her if he's washing his wife. So, for example, her father cannot, her son, whatever. So if he's not going to be able to do it on his own, is it permissible to have another woman to help him? If it's one of his maharim, that's fine. But this is permissible.
To have the spouses do the janazah, or is that a higher level, or
Janazah or the ghusl or the
sorry.
No. No, it's whatever is it best for the spouses to do the ghusl? Not necessarily. Because it's not always going to be feasible. But it depends, it's different. It's not, there's no such a thing as it's recommended. It's permissible, but it's not something that is recommended. It's not, the ruling is not recommended unless there's no trustworthy people, for example, to do the job, or people don't know how to do it, and it's the only one that would do it as the spouse, then it's better. No, why He says صفة الصلاة على الميت السنة أن يقوم الإمام عند صدر الرجل الميت. It's from the sunnah for the imam to be by the chest of the dead male. So to stand by the chest of the dead male وعند وسط المرأة, and for the female in front of the middle part of by the waist of the female. So the Imam should adjust his position when he's leading Salatul Janazah. If it's to a man, by his chest, and if it's for a woman, then by in front of the waist of the woman. ويكبر أربعا رافعا يديه مع كل تكبير. يكبر, he says 4 takbirat. Each one he raises his hand with every takbir. Allahu Akbar 4 times. يكبر التكبيرة الأولى. He says the takbir الأولى and ويتعوذ ويسمي. He says أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, and then he recites الفاتحة سرا, to say it secretly. ولا يستفتح. لا يستفتح does not say the dua of al-istiftah. It has, everything has difference of opinions, but we're saying here what is mentioned. ولا يستفتح, because according to here there's no evidence that the Prophet ﷺ would say dua al-istiftah. So to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, ولا يستفتح. Then يكبر الثانية, then the second takbir, ويقول اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. الصلاة الإبراهيمية that we say in the tashahhud. ثم يكبر الثالث, then to say the third. ثم يكبر الثالثة, then to say the third takbir and also to raise the hands. ويدعو, and makes dua after the third takbir, saying اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا, and continues, which means, oh Allah, forgive لحينا, forgive those who are alive among us and the dead among us, and those who witness and those who are not with us, and the young and the old, and the males and the females. إنك تعلم منقلبنا ومثوانا, you know our present state and the later where we're going to in this life and the hereafter. وأنت على كل شيء قدير, and you're able to do all things. اللهم من أحييته منا فأحيه على الإسلام والسنة. Oh Allah, whoever makes us, whoever you make among us alive, make him alive upon الإسلام والسنة. ومن توفيته منا فتوفه عليهما, and whoever dies among us, make them die upon them, الإسلام والسنة. اللهم اغفر له وارحمه, Allah forgive him, have mercy upon him, and if it's a female, اغفر لها وارحمها. وعافه واعف عنه, pardon him. وأكرم نزله, and honor his nuzul, his and nuzul is the place that you go settle in. The resting place. And the same word is used for the hotels, where a person rests in a place. وأوسع مدخله, and expand his mudkhal, his entrance, his going into the state. واغسله بالماء والثلج والبرد, and wash him with water and cold and ice, meaning with coldness, with goodness. ونقه من الذنوب والخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس, and purify him from the sins the same way the white cloth is cleaned from impurities. وأبدله دارا خيرا من داره, and give him a better dar. A dar is the house or the place or whatever a person will be in, better than his place that he was in this life. وزوجا خيرا من زوجه, and a wife better than his wife. وأدخله الجنة, but not to say that for the woman. وأدخله الجنة, I'm serious, I'm not joking. وأدخله الجنة, and to make him admitted to Jannah. وأعذه من عذاب القبر, and to seek refuge in Allah from the punishment of the grave for that person. وعذاب النار, and the punishment of the fire. وأفسح له في قبره ونور له فيه, and make his grave spacious and give him light in his grave. And it's not a must, of course, it's not mandatory, but this is the dua where you would find in the books of the Sunnah. وإن كان الميت صغيرا قال بعد قوله, and if the deceased is young child, to say after this من توفيته من, after saying من توفيته منا فتوفاه عليهما, after saying whoever dies among us, make him die upon al-Islam wa Sunnah, say then afterwards اللهم اجعله ذخرا لوالديه, make that child ذخرا, meaning what's ذخرا translated in the this is like for the child. Store treasure. So al-dhukhr is when you save something for your diet, for your needy times. وَفَرَطًا وَشَفِيعًا مُجَابًا. Al-farat is the one that goes ahead of you to prepare your coming. So that's what the child, if he dies, for Muslim parents, they wait for them by the gates of Jannah. And they would say, they would make shafa'a, intercession, that they don't want to enter Jannah unless they have their parents with them. وشفيعا, intercession, مجابا, to be accepted from him like this. اللهم ثقل به موازينهما. So the dua now is to the parents, or for the parents. Oh Allah, make their mawazin, their balance of their deeds heavy. وأعظم به أجورهما, and give them great reward. وألحقه بصالح سلف, and make him join with the best salaf, or those who came predecessors, those who came before him, بصالح سلف المؤمنين, the believers. واجعله في كفالة إبراهيم, and make him under the kifala or the guardianship of Ibrahim alayhi salam, as the Prophet ﷺ saw him. وقيه برحمتك عذاب الجحيم, and protect him by your mercy from the punishment of the grave. Then ثم يكبر الرابعة ويقف قليلا ثم يسلم واحدة عن يمين. Then to make the fourth takbir and stay for a little while, and then to make one taslim on his right side. And this is madhab Ahmad, to make one taslim on the right side. If the imam does two taslim, that's fine. And also the ma'moom, which is another point. The ma'moom should follow the imam. So some people in the haram they make one taslim, right? You see many people, they make two taslim. No, if the imam make one taslim, you make one taslim. So if the imam two taslim, you make two taslim. So and this is reported by Ibn Umar and others. So this is a valid thing of difference of opinion. We'll stop here because of the time. So we start by the fourth takbir of Salat al-Janaz. And some of the dua, if someone wants to say a portion of it, say more of it, things of that nature, mashallah, this is good. There's some questions here. We have the hadith before the questions. The hadith that we need to memorize, which is we all have it, inshallah, because we all know the pillars of Islam. What's the two hadith that's supposed to be memorized? 177 and 11. Alaykum assalam wa barakatuh. Anybody can see the message? $120. Okay, so 120. Didn't take 120 yet. Okay, so 120, which is easy hadith, inshallah, to memorize. And this is, everybody has to memorize it. So say after me, inshallah. Hadith 120. عن عبد الله بن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنهما. عن عبد الله بن عمر ابن الخطاب رضي الله عنهما قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: بني الإسلام على 5: شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وحج البيت وصوم رمضان. رواه البخاري ومسلم. As you see, the order in some of the narrations might be different between the Sawm and Hajj, but this is the narration that we chose, inshallah. So as we all know the hadith, Bunya al-Islam ala khams, Islam has been built on 5, which is the 5 pillars of al-Islam. Shahadati, with a kasra, that means it's badal from khams. Since khams is maksur, Bunya al-Islam ala khamsin, so then when you continue, you say shahadati, right? Or you can say shahadatu if it's ala al-ibtida, but we're following here this one form. Shahadati an la ilaha illallah, to witness that there's no one worthy of worship except Allah, wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasul, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. And abd, that means he obeys the commands of Allah, submit himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most perfect way,
and he's the messenger of Allah. وإقام الصلاة, the second pillar, to establish the salah with its pillars, conditions, and everything. وإقام الصلاة. And وإيتاء الزكاة, to give the zakah. Every word has its, of course, rulings, and as we will, the next chapter is the zakah, by the way. As zakah is not to be written off. You can't write off your zakah. You can give someone a loan, right? And then later on, that person is not able to pay back his loan. So let me consider that zakah. Doesn't work that way. You have to give zakah out. While you're giving it, it has to be zakah. You have to have it, the intention, because it says وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ. And we'll talk about that inshallah. وَحَجِّ الْبَيْتِ, and to make hajj to the house of Allah in Mecca. And this is, of course, once in lifetime for those who are able to do so as far as the obligation. وَصَوْمِ Ramadan, and to fast the month of Ramadan for those who are able to do so. So these are the 5 pillars of Islam, which is, again, inshallah, it's easy to memorize. So this one, everyone has to memorize it, inshallah. So everyone with us, inshallah, at least you have a hadith that you have to recite. So we'll have many of those who would recite this weekend, inshallah. Should we start with the questions? The first question. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa iyyakum. This is this morning. Could you please explain when to read the salah of lunar solar eclipse louder? First of all, we agreed that it's not called eclipse anymore. It's called what? Kusuf. Or khusuf, you have the choice. So when to read the Salatul Kusuf, or for the sun, or the khusuf of the qamar, all of them are to be recited loud. Both during the day, during the night, at any time. We didn't talk about many of the rulings. What if the salah comes in the forbidden time? After Asr, for example. The eclipse is after Asr, after Fajr. Can people pray? Or if it comes at the time of the salah, time of Jumu'ah, and there is eclipse, should you start with the Jumu'ah, or people should start with the khusuf? In general, if both can be done, you start with the one that is going to be finished before the other. I don't know if I say that correct. Meaning, if the khusuf, say for example, Salatul Jumu'ah is at 1, and the sun, the eclipse of the sun starts at, say, 12:30, for example, and it's going to be done at 1:30. Then you start with the eclipse, with Salatul Kusuf. Even if you delay Jumu'ah, there's no harm. But if it starts in a way that if you keep on praying it and you would miss Jumu'ah, no. Or if you prayed at 12:30 and you stop, after some time so that you pray Jumu'ah, and the same thing for Fajr. If it starts at Fajr time, should you start with Fajr or the Salatul Kusuf? Start with Salatul Kusuf, but then don't miss Salatul Fajr. But if you pray Fajr and it's going to be extended, then pray Fajr first and then pray Salatul Khusuf. So every situation has to be assessed if you're able to do one or the other. If either or, then of course the fard comes in place first. If it's a forbidden time, like after Fajr, for example, after Asr, there is a valid differences of opinions, and some said just to make dua, some said it's to make the salah, because there's a reason to make the salah then, so it's any time to make it, and to say it loud at all times. And we're not getting into many differences of opinions in this subject. Allah. One more question, then the rest after the salah, inshallah. How do we tell if the khusuf or kusuf is completed to determine how long to pray the salah? Or should we determine by the meteorological estimate before starting the salah? Very good. And again, we did not mention all the masail in the subject. One of the important things is that you don't pray unless you see it, or unless it's seen, not individually seeing it, but unless it's seen by the people. If it's cloudy and people are not able to see it with their naked eyes, then they don't pray, even if it's up there. It has to be seen by the people in the locality, at least some of them. So it has to be seen. And when does it end? you can use these things as a help or a sign. They say it's going to be 2 hours, so you can make it like this. There's no harm. But even if it went longer than what it is, that's fine. There's no harm also. Even if people finish it earlier, also there's no harm. It's the most perfect way that it's extended till it's all done. And to recognize the needs, of course, of the people. We'll stop here, inshallah, and we'll continue with the rest of the questions after the salah. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Answering some of the questions that is related to the topic that was before Salatul Isha. We talked about Salatul Kusuf, the eclipse, and Salatul Janaza, but we didn't finish yet the different masail and matters of Salatul Janaza. But before we go through the questions, I would just mention the questions that are related briefly, inshallah. But one thing that I want to remind myself and everyone with, at all times, the most important thing for us to learn is the obligations in our deen, because we need to fulfill the obligations. And as the hadith al-Qudsi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِ. That no one can get himself closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than what is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it as an obligation. So the obligations are the first, of course. And when we say obligations, of course, the salawat and things like this, but matters of belief. Without a sound belief, without a sound aqidah, the ibadah might not even not accepted. And especially with fitan and things of that nature, we need to make sure that we learn our aqidah. And we need 2 forms of learning that is upon us to learn. And this is upon every Muslim. The aqidah, the matter of belief that makes a person a Muslim. So someone is a disbeliever. What makes him a Muslim? Then there is the pillars of al-Iman, for example. And then what is the aqidah that makes a person among the people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? To perfect this. And that's why when we heard in the dua, part of the dua to say in the janazah, and this is something that the early generations of Islam used to say when they start seeing the splitting or the deviation among the ummah. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to say that dua, Allahumma amitni ala al-Islami wa sunnah. Oh Allah, make me die upon al-Islam wa sunnah. Even though the word al-Islam is sufficient and spacious enough for all of us. But because many people, they attribute themselves to the word Islam, and sometimes they're not even upon the deen of Islam, groups and sects and things like that. And that's the importance of learning the Aqidah. What is considered to be outside the fold of Islam and what's not, what's deviation, how far or close the deviation is. And we have, alhamdulillah, by the will of Allah, this deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved it. The Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And what the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, he said, alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnati al-khulafa al-rashidin al-mahdina min ba'di. Be upon my sunnah and the sunnah, the way of the rightly guided Khalifa after me, Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhum, to be upon them. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam said what he said when before that he said, فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ يَعِشْ مِنْكُمْ فَسَيَرَ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever among you live, they will see many differences. So what to do? عَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. Be upon my sunnah and the way of the rightly guided Khalifa after me. عَضُّوا عَلَيْهَا بِالنَّوَاجِذ. Bite on it with your teeth. Don't let it go whatsoever. So that means people try to take it away from you. So hold fast onto it. وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحْدَثَاتِ الْأُمُورِ. Be warned against the newly introduced matters in the deen after them. And it's by the mercy of Allah that all of these newly invented matters was invented after the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. Or it start to show at the end time of the generation of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved and protected the Sahaba from this deviation. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum opposed it when it first started. The major deviations and splitting the ummah. And then it continued afterwards. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected also the Imam of the deen, Imam Abi Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi'i.
They're from the Imam of Ahl Sunnah. So to learn the way that they were upon and to be upon this, this is definitely something that we need to be upon. Sorry for taking so much time. Very brief, give brief answers, and I hope sometimes it's dangerous because a person might misunderstand what is being said. So hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, it'll be clear. If it's not clear, please ask again. Only the ones that are related, inshallah. For the women in the qamis, is the qamis an izar and khimar to be stitched and then 2 extra pieces of cloth over that? It's talking about the kafan or the kafan for the janazah. We said that for men, very brief, it's 3 sheets. 3, if it's perfect, if it's white, 3 sheets, and to be wrapped one after the other. For women, it's 5 pieces of clothing, 2 sheets, normally like men, and as mentioned, is the izar, the lower sheet, and the qamis is what goes from the neck down, and the khimar, to be more covering. And of course, these things definitely will be stitched, not to be loose. But if it's not done like this, it's still fine. If it's 1 sheet for both, that's fine, as long as it's covering and so on. But this is something that the ulama mentioned so that it covers more, so that to honor the deceased till they are put in the grave. From the moment that they die till they are put in the grave, they need to be honored, not to smell anything bad from them, not to see anything bad in them, right? So that's why all of this precautions, things to make sure that they're honored. And one of which, and again, I would mention this because this is a practice done by many, the issue of exposing the face of the deceased for people to see. The Prophet ﷺ, when he died, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came and he kissed the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, "Ma atyabaka hayyan wa mayyitan ya Rasulullah," how pure you are when you're alive or when you're dead, O Messenger of Allah. So if it's something like this, that's fine. Someone died and he's still in his home or in the hospital or something like this, and people come and they even kiss him, that's fine. From his maharim and things like this. But once a person is, the coffin is wrapped and after the ghusl, it is best not to do so. And to honor the deceased, to keep him like this till he's buried. And there's not been a practice from among the early generations of Islam where they do it in the same way that people do it in a systematic way. They lay him down and everybody see, and the people go around. This is not their practice whatsoever. Plus, as the ulama, they say, what if something that is in the deceased that people should not see? Sometimes some people, their color changes, and people then start having these hallucinations. Oh, that's a bad sign. That means he died in a bad ending. And by the way, if someone's color changes after he dies, it's not a bad ending. It's not a sign of a bad ending. It's not a sign of anything, right? So, or someone dies smiling, and people say that's a sign that this, Allah knows best, and signs are signs. It's not certain. If someone that is righteous, someone that his life was righteous, mashallah, and good person upon the deen, and someone sees something like that, we can say, yes, a sign, a good sign. We hope that this is a good thing for him. But what if someone was wicked in his life and he lived an evil life? And he dies and he's, they make him smile or they put makeup on. And so it's, our religion is not based on these types of things. But again, the point here is part of honoring the deceased, not to expose them, and to leave it for if there is an exceptional situation or a dire need for a person or something like this or two, but not to make it as the way that it's done in a systematic way. I'm not keeping my word of making it brief. Okay, what happened if someone had a miscarriage after 4 months, but the Muslim family didn't know for the body to have ghusl and janazah salah? Is there any kafara, I guess, to be made for the mistake, but they did do the kafan and give name? As we said, if the child miscarriage was after 4 months, which that means the life has been blown in, the ruh has been blown into the body, and he comes out mukhallaq, that means comes out as a human being, not pieces of flesh. That means he died after the 4 months, because again, if a child is died before 4 months and then he comes out after 4 months, but just comes out as pieces of flesh. So if he comes out as being formed as a human being after 4 months and above or more, then to be given a name, to name him, to name that child, and to make salatul janazah, and to make ghusl, to wash him, and to coffin and everything, and to be buried. And if people didn't know that, or they, there's no kafara to it, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiving. For a dead woman, the only man allowed to do ghusl is husband. Her brother and father cannot help him, correct? Similarly, for dead man, if wife helps, then can his sister or mom help? As a rule, for the man is to be washed with his wasiyah first, the one that he made a will for, that he washes him. If not, then his father and above, grandfather. If it's not any of his relatives or son and down or brothers, or male in general. And for women, females. And also it's permissible for a husband to wash his wife and a wife to wash her husband. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his wife washed him. Right? And the same thing with Fatima radiallahu anha, Ali radiallahu anhu washed her. So this thing that among people that once the husband or the wife dies, they cannot see each other and they cannot touch each other, this is wrong. So the husband can wash his wife and the wife can wash her husband. And of course, if they need help, then it has to be from the maharim. So the husband, for example, if he's washing his wife, cannot be a strange woman that is helping him. Maybe his sister, her sister is not permissible for him. So his sister, his mother, things like this. If the husband is the one to wash, but not her brothers. If a woman dies, not the brothers to wash her, not the father. So it's the women and or her husband. No, Allah. No. Bintaha, her daughter, right? Her granddaughter. MashaAllah. We can have a list, MashaAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all those who deceased and make it easy for all of us, inshallah. Is it wajib for the assigned person to wash the dead, or can he decline? That's a good question. If someone wrote in his wasiyah and his will, so and so is to wash me, to make ghusl on me. Of course, it's recommended, it's good, but it's not wajib. It's not mandatory. Otherwise, someone in the farthest part on earth, and he writes in his will, the most famous alim is to wash me. Things that doesn't, so it's not wajib, but it's good to fulfill definitely the wasiyah of a person, if a person is able to, or he might not have the ability to do it. You said that it's forbidden to pray after Asr and Fajr, but if you missed Dhuhr, should you wait till Maghrib to make it up? The answer is no, you should make Dhuhr right away. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, من نام عن صلاة أو نسيها فصلاته حين يذكرها. Whoever overslept or missed a salah, forgot a salah, or slept, then he has to pray it right when he remembers it. So if a person slept and he woke up after Asr, say for example that he realized that he didn't pray Dhuhr. He prayed Asr and he slept, or he woke up before Maghrib and he realized that he didn't pray Dhuhr. Pray Dhuhr right away. Don't wait till after Maghrib. Because Dhuhr is an obligatory salah, and once you remember it, you should pray it. And the same thing, of course, for Asr. If you see the eclipse, is it wajib to make the khusuf salah? It's not wajib. It's sunnah mu'akkada. It's very stressed. And it's to be done jama'ah in the masjid. Some approved it to be done at home, but it's best to be done in the masjid. Two more questions. The forbidden times to pray, is it right after Asr or from Asr till Maghrib? The forbidden times for the salah, once a person prays Fajr, when a person prays Fajr till sunrise. And to add a little bit onto this, from Adhan al-Fajr till after sunrise by Qadr al-Rumh, which is 10 minutes, the only salah that is permitted is Sunnatul Fajr and the Fard of Fajr. That's it. Right? To make sure that you only pray these two. Of course, after Salatul Fajr, then salah is forbidden till after sunrise. And at the time of the Zawal, which is 5 minutes or so before the Adhan of Dhuhr, when the sun is right in the middle of the hemisphere. And after you pray Salatul Asr till Maghrib, also this is forbidden. And during Khutbah al-Jumu'ah, when the Imam is given khutbah, unless you come and you pray Tahiyatul Masjid. Is raining on the day of funeral a good sign for the deceased? It's neither. As the Prophet ﷺ, even when his son Ibrahim died, and it happened to be in that day the sun eclipsed, and they prayed Salatul Kusuf, and the Prophet ﷺ, in the Shams wal Qamar ayatan, there are signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا ينكسفان لموت أحد. It does not get eclipsed because of the death of anyone. So even an event like this
a person, if it happened to someone, they might use it for their own benefit. The sun eclipsed because of the death of so and so. No, this is ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't eclipse or not because of the death of someone, rain or not, it doesn't matter. But of course, at the time of rain, the dua is accepted, more likely to be accepted. So to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, to deal with signs, if it gives a good feeling, sure. And we hope with the signs. But if the signs are not there, it doesn't mean anything, right? So deal with the signs. If there's a good sign, we say that's a good sign, mashallah. There's nothing wrong with that. But if there's no sign, someone died and it's extremely cold, extremely hot, and it's stormy, and all of these types of things, it's not a sign of anything. It's not a sign that the person is bad, for example. Wallahu a'lam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy and accept from each and every one of us, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.